All right. Today I get the pleasure to sit down and talk to Dr. Jason Romesburg. How's it going, man?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, Boyega?
Good. Okay, so I'm going to do a poor man's introduction, but we're going to learn more about you and your experience shortly. But you're a practicing neuro-radiologist who unknowingly was honing your entrepreneurial skills when you started at Interventional Radiology Clinic. You also are the founder of Running Lights, a beverage company, and there have been a lot of learnings in between. And so we're going to explore that, and excited to talk to you about your experience and your crazy venture into being an entrepreneur.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here and share some of my experiences, and hopefully it may help somebody along the way.
Absolutely.
Happy to talk about.
And I also forgot a very important note about your bio, a fellow UVA grad. Just got to shout it out.
Yeah, go Who's.
There you go. All right. So I like starting off with a fun question first. What did you want to be growing up as a kid?
Oh, growing up, I wanted to be Andre Agassi. Yeah, so I grew up playing, actually first probably Tony Hawk. Grew up like in that phase with, skating and Tony Hawk was really popular. And then I got into tennis really competitively when I was, probably 8, by the time I was 8 to, 12, and just Agassi with his cool shoes and clothes and bright colors. And, that was just, he was like, my idol. So I played a lot of tennis growing up and ended up going on to play for UVA. But at the time, and actually the colors and things like that from Agassi in the 90s and all that still stick with me, actually. And even the color, funny you bring it up, because some of the color schemes on our labels, I tried to use the kind of palette from some of those colors back in the 90s with like fluorescent pinks and yellows, and sort of bring that purples and sort of bring that back, vibrant colors into the can. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, so I wanted to be a pro tennis player, and that was kind of a semi-serious thought until, even through college. But then I think in maybe high school, college, I started getting probably a little bit burned out, and in college, the skill compared to some other people, it started to come to the realization that probably wasn't going to be, the path. So things kind of shifted and ended up kind of deciding to go onto this path to be ultimately a neuro-radiologist. But yeah, that's where it started. Yeah.
And I love your humility to say, I went from, a collegiate tennis player to, neuroradiology. So I'm very curious, like, what was that pivot like, and why, just out of my own interest, like why neuroradiology? You can say it.
Well, it's a long path to get to that point. So it certainly wasn't something I was like, oh yeah, neuroradiology, that's it. It was 10 years, actually after I finished college of, med school, internship, radiology residency, and then fellowship. So I tacked on 10 years after college. So it was like, it evolved from the sports, and I started getting interested in biology major and medicine. And I sort of was appealed to try to incorporate those with maybe physical therapy, if we'd be like involved in sports in some way and athletes. And that just sort of evolved into, maybe just go ahead and apply for med school. And so I was a little late into the game in terms of really knowing what I wanted to do. So I, spent a year after I graduated teaching tennis and taking some extra courses in Richmond as a tennis professional instructor. And, that actually, was a great year. Worked with athletes that wanted to go play college tennis, and kind of helps me now because I still am involved with the tennis instruction world. But Then once I got into med school, I really fell in love with anatomy and doing little procedural things. I thought maybe surgery, but ultimately radiology had a broad scope where you have to know anatomy of the whole body, basically, to be a radiologist. You study all the imaging, you image the entire body. When you learn radiology, you have to know all the anatomy. And that was my most interesting subjects to me in med school, and, dissecting in gross anatomy, the cadaver and stuff like that was really interesting. So, in radiology, the interventional aspects of it are really, interesting, because they're rapidly, coming out with new procedures, and the things that they can do with minimally invasive techniques with just literally a needle through your groin. We can coil an aneurysm in your brain, with a microcoil, and do things like that. So that was just fascinating also. And so it was a combination of that put me into radiology path. Right. And then I ended up doing my residency at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem, and had some really excellent mentors and teachers that many of those people, like Carol Gear and Mike Zapadka and Mike Baker, and they were, and Jonathan Burdett, they were really good mentors for me. And so it was, the people that I was around also helped me sort of go down to the neuro path, which is an additional year after radiology. So that was a training that's kind of how it evolved. And I liked the brain pathology, about the brain and the spinal cord and tumors and multiple sclerosis and all that stuff interested me. So that's kind of how it evolved into being neuro. And I did a lot of procedures to get into the interventional clinic discussion, I guess, if you'd like. But the procedures was something that interested me. I did a lot of spinal interventions and things like that, like people that had compression fractures and osteoporotic compression fractures, or cancer-related tumors in the bone that cause fracture of the spine. We would do procedures where we inject cement into their vertebral column, to help their pain and stabilize the fracture. We would do that under fluoroscopy, which is basically real-time X-ray visualization. And so procedures like that were things that I learned how to do that were pretty advanced, and I could bring to my practice when I came out, and just so that kind of, I built some procedures off of that and tried to develop that patient base and referral base to ultimately try to do those on my own when I was out in practice, which I did.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I appreciate you kind of walking me through that, because it is kind of starting to connect the dots of this kind of pursuit of curiosity and saying, okay, this is interesting. Let me lean into it. And so I want to, keep following that path, because when we did our prep call for this, you made a statement that says, I was kind of an entrepreneur and didn't realize it. And so I want to get into, at what point, to what experiences did you have that made you recognize that what you were doing in, the interventional radiology space was actually very entrepreneurial? And like, what's the thing that made you bite the bug?
Yeah. I didn't I've been out of that group now for, out of the interventional clinic that I was working in for about 3.5 years now. And I probably I never looked at it as entrepreneurial in the moment. It wasn't until maybe about 2 years ago or so, when I was kind of exploring other things on my own and just pursuing other ventures in the meantime, that as I reflected back on, what some of the things that interested me in particular about it was, why I would spend so much time beyond, the regular daytime hours trying to build the infrastructure and the referral base, and why would you do that? You're already there, for 10 hours. But then it was really the challenge of and the reward is there's this interesting balance between a personal challenge of a skill that you have and really trying to figure out a way that you feel like you can offer it to people and a service, right? And how do you get yourself out there to offer it? That was like the barrier, right? Like I have this skill, you could apply it to different things like, okay, entrepreneur has this big idea or a product even that they've got this like initially thing, but how do you get it to people? How do you get them to trust you that they'll actually, purchase it or engage in what you're offering? So that was really interesting because I had to start to think about selling myself, even though I didn't like to think about it that way, but you had to communicate with the referring doctor. Let's say an oncologist, okay, that treats cancer patients they would have to refer a patient to me for me to treat their fracture. Like I don't, as a radiologist, have, the patients don't they don't know about me unless their primary care or their cancer doctor really sort of refers them to me. It's a subspecialty. So I had to make them all like aware that myself and my service exists. Right. And that was sort of personally challenging and awkward because I had to go do presentations at offices and sort of tell them about me and my services and why they should do it or consider it. And it was basically like a mini pitch to them about this procedure that I could do. Okay, so that was, but then there was a positive feedback loop because the clinicians liked it because I offered a really good service to them. I would get back to them immediately. Their patients would get phone calls. I would take care of them. And so that was a positive feedback loop. And then the patients loved it and they were doing well. They liked the procedures that I was doing. And, I was doing a good job with the patients. So, that was kind of looking back on it, how as I'm doing some of these newer things or ventures that I was working with the restaurant and now the beverage company and stuff, it's looking back on it was more when I reflected that really was a form of entrepreneurialism in a way that helped prepare me for current things. I just didn't look at it that way at the time.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. So, I usually ask the first action question, but I'm going to save it because I think that there's kind of a lot in the middle that I'd like to explore. And so one of the things we talked about was, you made an investment. You call it the classic doctor story. You made an investment. You realized that you didn't do enough due diligence around it. Kind of tell me about that experience and what that was like.
Yeah. So this was probably about 2 or 3 years into private practice job. A group of about 15 to 20 radiologists, and I didn't have like much training, if any, on the business side of, whether it be entrepreneurialism or just investing in ventures and how to critically look at a business plan, how to analyze your investment opportunities. How does that make sense with respect to other things you have going on, like a huge pile of student loan debt? Should you be taking a really high risk on something that, so at the time I was just like, okay, this is a no-brainer, low risk, right? Because to get some of the backstory and the details, I think will help it make sense to explain, for maybe help somebody not make the same mistake that I made. And so the venture was about a women's imaging facility. So it was mainly focused on mammography services. That was like the core of the service, right? And you figure everybody needs a mammogram, that you hit a certain age. If you're a female, not everybody, but every female, when you hit a certain age, based on guidelines, you're supposed to, get your mammogram. So there's a level of guarantee service there, right? And at the time, mammography actually was really the strength of our group. That section was doing well. The business was growing. We had they were very highly reputable mammographers, and that wasn't my specialty. So I wasn't even practicing in mammography, but that was always like a carrier of the group, so to speak, in terms of financials and just overall hospital clout in terms of necessity of our group. So everybody sort of in the group, not everybody, but a lot of people that were more naive about it, like myself, just sort of had this assumption that we're doing so well with mammography here, you just take the same model and put it in a different physical location and it's guaranteed to work, right?
Right.
Like, I'm not even going to look at that business plan. I'm not even going to like have meetings with the person that's on, boots on the ground, that's overseeing the renovation and the purchases of the $1 million of equipment and the hiring of the staff. I don't even need to know that person. I don't even, it's out of sight. Like, I'm too busy, with my day-to-day work. I got young kids. Like, I'm trying to build my interventional clinic. Like, this mammo, yeah, let's do it. Boom. So where do I sign?
Right.
That's sort of, that's, all right. So the classic doctor mistake, nobody was like, hey, you're about to make this classic doctor mistake. It wasn't until after the fact that, as I started to read more and learn more, that's what I did. I just, didn't know I was doing it, of course. But it's this combination of lack of formal teaching in certain things, like if you're sort of slanted towards the business entrepreneurial route earlier in college, you're going to be more inclined to hopefully, get down that business pipeline. You might start getting courses that would really kind of give you some of those basic tools to analyze situations like that, and speak the language and know what to look for. So, I didn't. So that was the recipe, ingredient A. Then ingredient B was that I didn't have any money throughout, college, med school, residency, my whole, basically now here I am in my, early 30s, 10 years after college, and I finally have a good salary and I've had a job for a few years. And I have some money, if I have a little bit of cash that I can throw at something and, investment that sounds like a great opportunity. And there's respected individuals in my peer groups that are, have been doing this for 20 years as a radiologist that are also investing in it and that seem like they're doing it good. So I fell a victim to not doing my own due diligence, not having the right, not to make an excuse for myself, but I think, the lack of formal teaching was an element of it, to even look out for basic sort of red flags. And then the combination of having some money and being busy at the same time where you make sort of quick, that convenient decision. So it ended up, we can get into the however much details or not you want, but it ended up, not being a good investment. And, the business ultimately ended up being a huge time, investment down the road as we tried to help it recover from what became, what surfaced to be a impending doom. And we really, as we tried to make it recover and put more time and investment into it, it sort of ultimately failed. But and I can talk more about that if you like or not. But that was the mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to open old wounds, but I
don't mind talking about it. It's fine. Yeah, I'm happy.
But I am curious from, making that mistake, how did you kind of deal with it internally and kind of approach the next investment opportunity? Because you did, pursue a restaurant business with your brother-in-law who's a chef, and it is incredibly successful. So what was it that got you kind of internally and mentally and emotionally over that first experience?
It took a lot. It was hard on my family and my wife, and just in terms of the emotional stress of like realizing after the fact that I really made a bad, that I did not do my due diligence, put myself out there like that. And then just the time commitment of trying to, help a business succeed is just, it's just not something that it's not going to work unless you really put your all into it. And that's something that I learned through that process at the end, and was sort of like, wow, if I am going to do something like a business where I have to invest my money, I'm going to, first of all, know intimately the people that are involved. Like, that is like one of the most important things. I was just listening to a talk at the BevNet conference in Los Angeles. We were there for the new beverage showdown, and it was Cameron Diaz speaking, and she was talking about her investment in this tea company. And she was saying, I bet on the jockey, not the horse. And so she, the person that was passionate behind it and working behind the scenes and knew that they were going to do some of the things that some people aren't going to be willing to do, go that extra mile. And that's really important. So I learned that is key. And investing as a financial partner with somebody, you need to know that they're going to, to go that extra mile when, they're going to stay late if they need to, and they're going to make some sacrifices that are going to be painful, but they're not going to take the easy way. But in that process, they're like a peer in the sense that, there's rewards in making it through that pain, like that, that if you don't have a difficult path, there really isn't much reward at the end. And, like an easy path is kind of boring and, not that fruitful. So anyway, I knew that was kind of just some of the stuff that I took away from it, the big picture stuff. And I knew with my brother-in-law, Mikey, he's an exceptional person. He's, that was with him, it was a no-brainer. Of course, I knew him, better than most anybody. And he's one of the hardest working people that I know. He's like, if anything, maybe go too far, right? He's so passionate about his work. And he's a really talented chef, and he was already had established himself as somebody capable of doing it and wanted to kind of make that next step where he was going to open his own restaurant. So my role in that was, was really just to kind of be somebody who could be a partner with him to help facilitate him taking that next step, and be a partner, help, co-invest, but also just help find investors, raise funds, put together a plan, take our time, help establish the real estate piece of it in parallel, get that ready. So just set up the business in a smart way that everything we could do to set it up for success. And that would, again, going back to the failed venture, we had taken a massive amount. I think this is useful for listeners that, another mistake that I think we made was brand new medical equipment, brand new imaging equipment. The person that made the decision to do that for us, my fault for not being involved in the decisions, but we bought brand new medical equipment. But if in medical equipment, you can imagine how expensive the imaging equipment, like to buy a brand new ultrasound machine that does biopsies, or a brand new MRI, that kind of stuff. Right, a ton of money, and to buy it like as soon as it's like a brand new car, right? It's not, it doesn't go up, and it just goes down as soon as you drive it off the lot. So as soon as we put it in the office, we lost money, boom.
Right. And
what were we gaining by having this shiny equipment? Like we hadn't demonstrated that we needed that to get new customers. Like we're actually in an area that needed more access. So really what they just needed was access, not anything fancy or shiny. So that right off the bat, there was a whole like debt lesson, buying used equipment lesson, not operating in debt, first of all. So we went into the restaurant thing with no debt, make sure that, except for the, investors, but all the equipment, Mikey would buy all used, he was so smart about all the expensive equipment that goes into a restaurant to buy it used, fix it up, but boom, you're paying, 10% of what, you would have buying it new. And so just little things like that, really helped with the decision-making process going forward.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And thank you for sharing, because one of the things that was popping in my mind is, the businesses are, for the women's health clinic, the restaurant, they're very kind of asset heavy businesses, right? And so that thinking about debt and thinking about, what's good enough versus buying the shiny object, that's a really important lesson, because I know when I have ideas, I have the tendency to just like, okay, what's the new cool tool that I can buy and use to kind of do this more effectively? But being mindful about the capital, I think, makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and it gives you a better position, I think, to determine if you need to get if you need to get more advanced, newer equipment. You realize that once the other stuff is not meeting your needs, So you can build off of it, and it's just less exposure, from a capital perspective.
Got it. So coming on to Running Lights, what was your first action? Given the lessons that you've been learning, what was the first thing you did to start building Running Lights?
I had read a lot of books in between, trying to as this process was going on, I started to get more and more interested in this sort of entrepreneurial side. But again, I wasn't thinking of myself as an entrepreneur either, just sort of helping things along the way and realizing that I thought this stuff was really cool, like, doing things outside of medicine, but just that sort of interested me. And so the first thing I did with Running Lights, as far as taking, I guess, the principal thing from what I learned was seeing if I could come up with a minimum viable product. So, I wanted to put myself out there as little as possible in terms of capital exposure, like I was mentioned. I had an idea. I feel like I identified a need, or I could also offer a good value proposition to a certain consumer segment, and then come up with a product I felt like I wanted for myself that also matched with people, like-minded people that would hopefully benefit from the drink. And then once I decided that I wanted to do it, I had to get my wife on board. That was probably the most important thing. She didn't say no. So that was, believe it or not, that was a critical, limiting factor often for anything in this household getting off the ground. Yes. So she's sort of the gatekeeper, but I have a lot of ideas that, pop up, and a lot of things that I've considered pursuing, but, you have to be selective with your time and what you think is, so we always have discussions about that kind of thing. And so once we decided that it was worth, kind of taking more steps and putting risk, because like you said, the time for me, time is very valuable. It's the time with my family, and I could be working more radiology. So I have to balance that. And so I wanted to come up with a minimum viable product. I guess I would say that was probably the most beneficial item that for your listeners maybe to learn from would be, if you have an idea and you think it's going to be useful, and try to don't spend a ton of money trying to come up with a prototype without talking to a lot of people first and coming up with your own bootleg prototype as close as you can to what you think might be, whether it's putting together, stuff, a compilation of things that you have around your house or whatever it may be, that you can get to some sort of functional minimum viable product that where you can get an assessment if people think will be useful or willing to spend money on, and then you can sort of spend a little more money to put yourself out there and move the ball forward. And so I've taken baby steps. It's about a year and a half just to get to, the process where we're, going into stores and stuff. But we're excited about it. I think it's going to it has a big potential, but we're taking our time with it and trying to be smart.
That's awesome. There's two questions that pop in my head, and I'm going to write the second one down. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into kind of this concept of MVP, or minimum viable product. Given the fact that you wanted to make a beverage, right? And again, you're not in this field. I'm curious about like how you broke down and figured out what your minimum viable product actually was. Was it the formula? Was it the packaging? Was it like figuring out, okay, what's the problem with the drinks that are in the gas stations now? Like, how did you pinpoint exactly, okay, this is the least amount of work I have to do that someone would reasonably actually say, yeah, I'll try it, and I'll pay for it.
Right. Well, it is tricky with a beverage. It is, because you can't, without spending, you can't like walk around giving away free beverage that you've made, and not be spending a lot of money. So like finding somebody, I think that the keys to me were like before doing, investing money, and without telling people, hey, I'm starting a beverage, I'm making my own beverage, without just basically in conversations, like, when you're driving and you find yourself at a gas station and you just look around and it's a sea of standard sodas and high, really excessively caffeinated energy drinks. And do you ever find yourself like wanting something that's a little more moderately caffeinated? Or, just having that conversation, like, and people are like, yeah, I do, and just having that conversation over and over with the same sort of, you got to get more of an idea of the people that are more likely to have that response. Somebody that drinks regular soda all day, every day isn't going to say that. But like there's definitely, I think, a more thoughtful consumer out there that will drink sodas and will drink the standard energy drinks, but also knows that it's probably not great for them, right, or not the best option. But they're like, oh, whatever. It's fine. I like it, but there's not a great alternative. So my mindset was, I kind of felt like the idea was resonating with a particularly middle-aged males, but also females. Like the branding more so tends to be gauged a little bit towards males and females that don't want something too girly, but also there is a broader appeal there, but that's probably the core with the, I think that they trying to make an option that's desirable or cool, that happens to be healthier without overtly shoving health down somebody's throat, I think is probably in my mind ultimately the most effective way that I could contribute to like population health is, if you tell somebody to do something healthier, like it's the same thing that as a doctor you encounter like in the clinic, right? When we try to manage diabetes and hypertension, somebody who's like constantly has their sugars high and their blood pressure's high, and it's really a struggle to get them to regularly take their medicine and you have to like step back and kind of take these little small steps, achievable goals, right? So that they can see some progress and they can get a little traction. If you just make this huge change and you're like, you have to change your lifestyle, you're all of a sudden you're going to be, shooting yourself up with insulin all day. You're going to be exercising nonstop and you're going to be awesome, right? Like nobody's going to do that. But a small achievable goals, I think that was at least what I, in my experience and what others have told me that, that was sort of the best chance at a good outcome. A compliance basically is what we would call it, getting people to take their medication and have a better result, controlled. So I try to extrapolate that in terms of, what would be beneficial, right? You can offer, like, there's 0 calorie stuff out there. There's a ton of it, of course, right? 0 sugar, 0 everything. And you can drink water, which a lot of people do. But then there's the artificial sweeteners and all that stuff that you get into that I've never liked. So I didn't like that option. And I'm not somebody personally, even as a physician who considers myself active and healthy, try to be healthy. Like, I don't need 0 everything all the time, right? I don't want that. I don't need that. To me, that's too extreme. I'm just kind of a more moderate person in that sense. But so the idea was to create a little bit of a middle of the road option that's a more stepwise option that makes it a cool brand that's also a stepwise, way to maybe not have such an excessive amount of sugar and caffeine in a beverage. And once I found, that's a long way to answer your question.
That's perfect.
But I think once I started getting traction with that, and then, some national recognition with the New Beverage Showdown, making that competition, even though we hadn't even been in stores yet, that was really, I think that, I kind of knew that we were onto something and willing to invest more money. And so it helped. That's kind of where we are now.
Yeah. No, I really like that, because your MVP started with something that costs no money, which is just conversations. And like getting that validation from conversations, like, yeah, I've been in the situation where, and you're like, okay, you got the head down. Okay, let's try to touch other people. I think that's really great tactical advice to kind of get someone who's thinking about their idea and trying to figure out, like, oh, but it costs so much money. It's like, well, before you do anything, make sure you're actually solving a problem that enough people have. And your proposed solution is something that population finds intriguing. And I think you're right. By looking at the options are very extreme. Like Coca-Cola and Coke Zero taste very different. And if you don't like those options, you're kind of stuck in the middle where it's like, what do I do? Okay, I'll just go with water, and not be satisfied. So I like the fact that you kind of also looked at the extremes and kind of found the middle ground. And I think that's also, sorry to ramble, I think it's also interesting because you're not only in the middle ground, but you recognize that you had something that appealed a little bit more to men, but you also saw that there was an opportunity for women, but you didn't want it to be super girly. And so when I look at your site and I look at your brand, like, it does give me like a good middle of the road feel, because the pastels, I would imagine, would attract, the women audience, but then also kind of the Andre Agassi feel gives that kind of rogue man, male appeal. So I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
Go back to your MVP. Once the conversational side, then it was sort of investing a little bit in, well, let's get a drink and make sure that I can get one that tastes good, because ultimately I think if it doesn't taste good, it's probably gonna never, it's not going to be something that people are going to come back to, even though I would argue that there's a lot of drinks out there that are actually decent, that doing well, that aren't that great tasting. But anyway, I wanted something that tastes good. And so I, to get to more of a real MVP, other than a conversation, invested that money that was still, in the grand scheme of things, you could spend, you'd be proud, may or may not be surprised, but you could spend a lot of money trying to come up with formulations and like paying companies to do it or whatever, however you come, or, some people try to do it in their garage or whatever. But so anyway, I was able to strike a good balance of not over putting myself out there too much, but getting the flavors and the combination of ingredients how we wanted, which were really unique, and in a sense that we put whey protein in the drink, small amounts of it, which is the only kind of carbonated, caffeinated beverage of its kind that does that. And so there's a technical challenge, barriers that we had to overcome to be able to do that and make it scalable and all that stuff. So, that was the next step of a real kind of MVP, was having people taste it and getting feedback of people liking it before then, going all into the branding and everything like that. And that was sort of done alongside as we moved along. But yeah, you mentioned the Agassi thing. I think like the consumer, it's kind of like the branding is, if you like Tony Hawk, or if you liked Andre Agassi, or if you like Swatch back in the day, or still do, or if you, or Santa Cruz, or those types of brands, or motocross even, you'll sort of be instinctively, I think, drawn to the style, and we're kind of adjusting our labels a little bit too to bring the RL logo a little bit out more in that sort of almost in like a 90s way, motocross type way too. But anyway, yeah.
I like the idea of pulling in the nostalgia. It's like every time you mention Tony Hawk, I think about the video game where you just mash the buttons and he's just kind of doing all the kind of tricks and flips. But I do I see it. It is pretty cool. So one thing I'm also curious about is kind of this currency of time, right? You have a very demanding profession. You have kind of a beautiful family that you want to spend time with. You're starting this company, and it's in a very different field, right? It's very different industry, very different space. And so I'm curious about how you go about deciding what are the things that I need to double down, read books and learn, versus things that I need to find people to do and kind of hire someone that's smarter in that area to accomplish a task or to play that role.
Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah. The time thing is a big one. I think, like I alluded to before, it's critical because the kids are young. The family pulls you in a lot of directions, and which is important, and the balance is key. And I think my personality is, I can get consumed by some of this stuff and spend a lot of time just sort of getting into it so deep and passionately that you can kind of lose sight of some of that. So I try not to, and my kids are just the best reminder than anything. Just when I see them, it just, we have a great time together. We do, that's the funnest thing, that I do is just playing with my kids and hanging out. And I've tried to do things in a different way, especially since COVID, where can incorporate some of this learning process that I'm going through with them, to try to give them a little bit. It's a combination of try to teach them a little bit of information and also spend time with them at the same time. So like the whole beverage thing, they've been involved with every iteration of a taste and a flavor. They've tried them all. They've been right there along with us, very important in terms of, just being supportive and hey, just so they're part of it, the whole process, whether it was that, but going back to the restaurant with my brother-in-law, Mikey Maximowitz, who, they were, they just love the restaurant and love following him and being part of that process, and just sort of so they've learned a lot in terms of even going back. We have pictures of them sitting at the construction site when it was an old gas station that was graffitied up and closed down, and you can imagine it had the typical gas station roof with the the abandoned home. So we have pictures of them sitting at before it got renovated. And so they've sort of seen that whole transformation that you could take something, and just, this was his idea to make it a restaurant. We turned an old gas station into like a staple in the community. And Mikey did that with his talent. So they've seen that. They've seen that, their crazy dad sometimes might have just an idea that he thinks was interesting or worth pursuing, but didn't necessarily do it in an off the hook fashion. But there was a process there to try to investigate things, and we created something that from an idea, and then can actually get to the point where some people want to purchase your product that you made. Right. So my daughter, like, she makes bracelets, she makes jewelry, she wants to now like sell things on Etsy and that kind of thing. So like, they just they think about things, I think, maybe in that way, and I think it's helpful. But so hopefully that answered the question a little bit.
No, for sure. It's funny because it also triggered another question in my mind, and you sort of answered it, is as your kids are growing up and being very involved in your business and seeing what dad's doing, do you see the kind of entrepreneurial juices starting to flow as they start getting older? And I think about that because growing up to two parents that were in business, I know that I have a kind of a bent towards business. Even after my hoop dreams failed, I always knew I was going to get into business. And so I'm curious with your kids, do you have that feeling where it's like, yeah, I can kind of see, see the little mini entrepreneurs building?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it has anything to do with me, like as far as this stuff that we've done the last 10 years, or maybe it has, it's hard to know how much of it is, intrinsic versus that. But I know, like myself, like you mentioned, it's interesting that you say you were, like, yeah, I want to do business. Like for me, that was never a thought that I really had. It was all like my, not that one is better or not. It was just more of like healthcare, maybe healthcare kind of position like that, but never thought of like, yeah, I would start my own healthcare business or my own physical therapy clinic or something. It was all, just work as a this, not start a this, So, my dad was a math teacher, for 40 plus years. And my mom was a nurse for the same, that's very like dedicated and, working in their, industry, but not so much like, starting a business. So that wasn't necessarily something that was natural to me to think that way. So now that my kids do it, I am seeing, it seems more natural, especially to my daughter. She's like inclined to want to sell things, which is interesting. I think, like make something and sell it. And she'll say like things like she wants to run her store someday and like, have a shop. She's said that multiple on occasions that she wants to have her own shop. And I don't know. With her, it would not surprise me at all. I think she probably will be some type of owner of some shop or restaurant or product. I don't know. My son is he's really into games, and video games and YouTube, that kind of thing. So, he wants to be a video game maker. So he wants to design and build video games. He's only 8 years old, but like it wouldn't surprise me. And I think maybe that's also, again, it sort of seems a little entrepreneurial that he could someday, try to make his own game. But I don't know if that has anything to do with what we've done at home. But they're interesting kids.
No, man, it's awesome. I'm I've got a 10-month-old, and I'm constantly thinking about like when he starts seeing Daddy being a maniac about this business thing. What's he gonna what's he gonna accidentally kind of bring on? What are the things I need to be mindful of? So, but no, that's really cool. That's really cool that she already knows she wants to own a store and she's already kind of trying to sell those bracelets.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I always wondered, like, what kind of impact when I was working really long hours at the hospital when I was doing that other job, because of my daughter, she'll still be like, oh, we never saw you or whatever, she'll still make little comments like that. So one thing she has not said, which is for better or for worse, is that, I want to be a radiologist, or I want to go into medicine or something like that. So I think, the working, like being away, has an impact, and it's real. I think that whether or not I choose to admit how much, they seem to pick up on it. And, she was at the age where right before the pandemic, I was still working a lot at the hospital and being home really late hours, after missing dinner every day, that kind of thing. And but then I switched jobs and tried to open up things where I could get in purposeful changes that I made basically to my career, so that I could spend more time with them and also pursue other ventures that I was starting to get interested in. And so just for more creative outlets, like I felt like I was just hyper focused on, my profession and building that, but I had a lot of outside interests that had been suppressed. And for example, I wasn't even playing tennis anymore, just that kind of thing. So she'll every once in a while make comments like, oh yeah, you were never, you would never read me, that sort of thing. So that sticks with, you kind of remember that and try to stay grounded and balanced with that, because it's a real thing. So
no, I completely understand. I did the very similar thing getting out of consulting. It was like, this pays well, it's really good, I'm somehow pretty decent at this thing, but I need to make a conscious decision to give myself the space to be able to pursue things on my own time and get out of that tunnel vision. So I completely understand. Hopefully this kid, hopefully things get steadier by the time he start having core memories. That's my goal. I have a little bit more control.
And then, sure. I'm sure he'll, he's 10 months old. You said
10 months old. Yeah.
10 months. Okay. Yeah. You got plenty of time there.
Exactly. All right. Well, I want to be respectful of time, so let's hit some concluding questions that I ask every guest. First, what books would you recommend to other entrepreneurs?
One off the bat that comes to mind that I enjoyed, and going back to the discussion of the MVP and that type of thing, and sort of identifying need would be See, Solve, and Scale by Danny Warshay. He's at the Brown Entrepreneurial Institute. And so I think that's kind of a good, even for like people beginning, it could be like a beginner introductory level book. Again, for me, I was trying to just look at beginner, when I approached starting to read books on the topics, I was approaching it as a beginner. Even though, I kind of had some experience with other stuff, I wanted to reverse back and sort of learn what I could have, and then see how it applied in retrospect to those different things. So that was a good one. And just also, it's not necessarily an entrepreneurial book, but one that I found useful in terms of thinking about branding and just sort of coming up with ideas in general, and is Made to Stick by the Heath brothers is just kind of an interesting read, and I like their books in general, and that's kind of one that I have liked and tried to actually think of when I'm coming up with branding ideas, things that they talk about, of course, like being emotion and things that make it stick in general, we talk about, but that's useful information. I think, trying to make things emotional, relatable and concrete at the same time, but also credible, there's a combination of things they go through, and I think they're just kind of useful to break down. So those are two that just kind of off the top of my head that are useful.
Awesome. Just another spin to this question. For other folks in the medical field that maybe kind of intentionally or unintentionally leaning into kind of entrepreneurial ventures, are there any books, podcasts, or forms of media that you'd recommend?
There's I'm forgetting I think it's Physician on Fire, FIRE, like financially independent, retire early. That's one that he's a popular podcast that just in terms of thinking of doctor finances, he goes, discusses a lot about staying out of ways that you can avoid taking on debt and get your life in control, take control of your life and your time. And if you have interest in doing things outside of medicine, this is sort of maybe a good way to sort of look at sort of getting control of your time and your profession and not getting into the traps of trying to keep up with the Joneses with the doctor lifestyle and spend a lot of money on everything. And, if you want to be able to control your life and get into entrepreneurialism without getting into a ton of debt, that's kind of a good way to, not necessarily retire early and all that, but just sort of a financial control mentality that if you can get control of that, because myself and a lot of other physicians, of course, have, massive and professionals in general across all grad schools, especially, massive amounts of student debt, right? So it's a really important topic that you can't get control. And me personally, I didn't even, my main goal was get rid of my student debt. I wasn't going to make some huge financial, although I did make that other mistake that I talked about with student debt. But if I had to do it over and after that, I made sure I had, get my student debt paid off before, any big venture, because you could really put yourself out there at risk with student debt. Then you add up a big investment in some venture outside of medicine or in medicine so that would be a good additional advice.
Yeah, appreciate that. What question do you think I should ask the next guest?
That's a tough question. I think that I would be interested personally to know how much other people are willing to give up personal go into debt for these ventures that they're interested in, and give up how much of them would rather give up much of their company to see the idea succeed versus maintain more ownership of their company. I think there's an interesting topic there of how much equity of your company or your baby do you want to give up in order to see it ultimately get over the hump and make it a success with the capital that really funding that it needs and that sort of thing. But to get there, you have to, maybe even give it all up down the road or half of it. So I think that would be one topic to explore more that we didn't really get into, but
yeah, the question of debt financing versus kind of equity financing, that's really interesting. So I'm curious, I always do this. You got to answer your own question. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, I'm doing a personal exploration now of that. And, we'll see how that shakes out. I think, I'm not going to fall, I wouldn't want to let the product and the idea fall by the wayside and let myself get in the way of myself. If it ultimately required giving up whatever it might be, the control and the ownership that to if that was the thing that needed to happen to make it go on and be ultimately more successful, then that's okay. So I think I would, I'm open to it. But I also have this thing where it'd be, you still want to be involved. And there's of course, I'm not at this point yet with our company because we're too small, I think. But down the road, hearing that discussion and about, the founder CEO dilemma, is something that I will, be encountering probably sooner maybe than others, because I am a practicing radiologist and I still have a full-time job. So like the interesting topic, another one that would be kind of worth asking another entrepreneur would be one that, full-time when they started another job, and you yourself could speak on this. Be interesting to hear, because I know you were kind of in a different profession and you've sort of made that leap to do the podcast and do the Yensel and all. And so there is this like, sort of one's going this way, the other is, going full steam ahead. And maybe, so like for me, I've kind of tapered down radiology to make more time for Running Lights. And, at some point I'm going to have to make a decision for the success of both of those things. I can't put everything into everything all the time. So like, is it going to be, that's a whole nother podcast that you can talk about, do you want to be the CEO? Do you want to, give up your other career? Do you not give up your career until you you made a deal with yourself where you can replace your income, or at least maybe half of it? Or because there's a financial sacrifice that, probably most entrepreneurs make unless they're just coming into a ton of money, but like, where you're going to have to make that transition where you might have a gap of exposure, vulnerability, or difference in lifestyle, or where your risk ratio is different, where how your tolerance of what you're going to bring in versus taking that leap of faith with trying to build the other thing that, may look stupid because I have a secure job that makes money, but, this has potential. So that's an interesting discussion, I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on, because I think everybody that starts a side hustle or something on the side has this question of like, at what point do I leap? And you're right. It's some of the simple answers are, wait until I can replace my income. But a lot of times it's not that easy, because sometimes your business idea time is important, right? So understanding the time and space of like, is this the opportunity to strike and like go all in because there's a market opportunity? You got to factor that in. And can you sustain? Have you built yourself a long enough runway? So, yeah, you're right. It's a very important topic. And actually, one of these days, along with my co-founders, I'll be on my own podcast, which is kind of weird. And that is very much a topic that I want to talk about. It's like, I don't know if it's the right decision, but there was a lot of, I'd probably say at least 6 months of like strategizing in my mind of like, when's that kind of ramp down, ramp up? What's my runway? Oh crap. In the middle of it, I found out my wife was pregnant. Okay. So now we've got to redraw this whole thing. So, so yeah, no, it is at least an hour-long conversation for sure.
I think the runway conversation is also very interesting. Like, how long is the long enough runway? You always say like one of the most common failures for small businesses is not enough capital and basically enough runway in the beginning. And so, having somebody smarter than me talk about how you figure out the right runway would be useful for me.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, this has been awesome. Tell people where they can find Running Lights before we wrap.
Well, Running Lights right now is you can find in Taste, the Taste chain of Taste stores in Virginia. Currently a Hall's Grocer. and be coming to multiple stores also in Virginia and in the Southeast very soon. And hopefully even, we have our sights set high for broader distribution, and we got hit the ground running here with production and ramping up in January. So
it's awesome.
they can, of course, get it on the website, also runninglightsbeverage.com.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. I'm excited for the full-blown production. I'm going to buy a case later today. But thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. It's been fun.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it, and it's good talking to you.
Absolutely.